Hello and welcome to the channel. Poets and Pancakes. Poets and Pancakes is a humorous yet reflective essay by Ashokamitran about his time working at Gemini Studios in Chennai, then Madras, a prominent film studio in India. The essay gives us a peek into the world of filmmakers, poets, and the eccentric personalities that populated the studio. The narrator begins by describing his work environment where he was often misunderstood by his colleagues. Many thought he was doing nothing because he spent his time tearing up newspapers. This led to frequent visits from others who lectured him about how he should be using his literary talents more effectively. The story also focuses on Katha Mangalam Subbu. So Katha Mangalam Subbu, the number 2 at Gemini Studios. Subbu was a man of many talents. He was a poet, an actor, and a filmmaker. Despite his humble beginnings, he found success in the film industry due to his royalty, creativity, and charm. However, not everyone liked him, and no man in the makeup department harbored deep resentment towards him. This jealousy stemmed from Subbu's success, his close relationship with the boss, and his ability to remain cheerful despite failures. The essay describes the various quirky characters at Gemini Studios, including the legal advisor who was known for his serious formal attire while everyone else dressed in khadi. He had an interesting encounter with an actress whose temper was caught on tape, which ended her acting career. Eventually, the story department, where the poet and writers worked, was shut down. Gemini Studios was a place where many poets and writers gathered, including SDS Yogiyar, Sangu Subramaniam, and Harindranath Chattopadhyay. They were all passionate about literature, but they had little understanding of politics, and many of them had a strong aversion to communism. This was evident when the studio hosted a group called Moral Rearmament, which opposed communism. The staff had no real grasp of the political message but enjoyed the group's performances. The most striking event in the essay was the visit of the English poet Stephen Spender to the studio. The staff were baffled by his speech because they didn't understand English poetry or the significance of his ideas. However, years later, the narrator discovered that Stephen Spender had written an essay in a book called The God That Failed about his disillusionment with communism. The narrator was struck by the connection between Spender and the studio, and this moment marked a realization of the disillusionment shared by artists in both film and literature. Overall, Poets and Pancakes is a witty exploration of life at Gemini Studios. It's a mix of art, politics, and personal relationships, and the ways in which the world of cinema intersected with literature and politics during that time. Now, in details, the essay Poets and Pancakes by Ashoka Mitran describes his experience working at Gemini Studios in Chennai, a popular film studio in India. The essay paints a vivid picture of the unusual and quirky people who worked there, blending the worlds of filmmaking and literature. The work environment. The narrator worked in a small cubicle in the studio with French windows. Many people in the office thought he was not doing anything because he spent his time tearing up newspapers. This led to people frequently coming to lecture him about how he should be using his talent more wisely. Kotha Mangalam Subbu. The main person in the essay is Kotha Mangalam Subbu, who worked at Gemini Studios as the number 2 person, just below the boss. Subbu was a talented man. He was not only a poet but also an actor and a filmmaker. Despite his humble beginnings, he became very successful in the film industry. His talent was often overshadowed by his constant loyalty to the boss, which caused jealousy among other people at the studio. One such person from the makeup department hated Subbu because he felt that all his problems and failures were because of Subbu's success. Subbu was a very cheerful and hardworking person, and no matter what happened, he always tried to help others. He had a creative mind and could come up with many ideas for films. Subbu was also a talented poet who addressed the common people in his works. He wrote poems that were simple and easy for everyone to understand, and he also wrote a novel called Thilana Mohanambal. Despite his literary success, people around him believed his focus on films meant he was neglecting his poetry. The story of department and the legal advisor. At Gemini Studios, there was a group called the Story Department, where the writer, poets, and even a legal advisor worked. The legal advisor, unlike others in khadi, means traditional Indian clothing, always wore formal clothes like a suit and a tie. He was considered out of place among the more casual staff. Once, a talented but temperamental actress had a public outburst on the set, and the legal advisor calmly recorded her angry words. When she heard the recording, she was shocked into the silence. This moment marked the end of her career. The legal advisor's role, though important, was not appreciated by many in the studio. Poets and their views on politics. Gemini Studios was also a meeting place for famous poets like S.D.S. Yogiyar, Sangu Subramaniam, and Harindranath Chattopadhyay. These poets were also deeply interested in literature but were not very knowledgeable about politics. They were against communism, believing that communists were godless and violent. Their political understanding was limited, and they didn't fully grasp the deeper meanings of ideas like communism. The moral rearmament movement. In 1952, the studio hosted a group called Moral Rearmament (MRA), which traveled the world promoting values against communism. They put on plays that had simple moral messages, but the staff at Gemini Studios were more interested in the performances than in the politics behind them. The visit of Stephen Spender. One day, the studio received a visit from a famous English poet, Stephen Spender. The studio staff was confused because they didn't understand what the poet was saying, and his speech was hard to follow due to his strong accent. No one knew why he was visiting or what he was talking about. His visit seemed out of place in a film studio that made movies for the common people who did not have an interest in English poetry. Realization letter. Years later, the narrator discovered that Stephen Spender had written a book called The God That Failed, which was about how he and other famous writers became disillusioned with communism. This gave the narrator a clearer understanding of the poet's views and helped him realize why the people at Gemini Studios had reacted so strangely to Spender. The poet was not just a poet, he had also struggled with the ideas of communism, which was more relevant to the staff than his poetry. Conclusion. In the end, the essay Poets and Pancakes shows the mixture of film, literature, and politics at Gemini Studios. The studio was a place where art and culture met in strange ways, and the essay is a humorous reflection on how these worlds collided. The characters at the studio, especially Subbu, are depicted as creative, loyal, and misunderstood, while also dealing with the complexities of life in a place where film and poetry often came together.